Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week it's kind of a different episode. A few days ago, Sylvain Sylvain of the New York Dolls passed away, and so this episode is going to be a celebration of his life and his work. I hope I do them both justice. Sylvain was not only the linchpin that kept all of the other doll members together, but he was the one who came up with the name the New York Dolls. Sylvain was working in a store called Different Drummer that would sell cool clothing and kitschy items. And every time he left, he would see New York Doll Hospital across the street. And he was like, that would be a great name for a band. Don't you wish everything was that simple? So this is dedicated to Sylvain Sylvain, who I love. L-U-V. Let's do it. In Queens, New York, at Newtown High School, Sylvain Sylvain met Billy Murcia, and the two became best friends. Sylvain and Billy used to see this really cool kid surrounded by girls in the cafeteria of Newtown High School. His name was Giovanni Genzali, and he would eventually be Johnny Thunders. Sylvain wanted Johnny in the band because of all the girls that were attracted to Johnny. Johnny looked like he'd make a great guitarist. Johnny asked Sylvain, how many strings does a guitar have? Sylvain said 6. Johnny asked, how many strings does a bass have? Sylvain said 4. And Johnny said, Sylvain, I'm your fucking bass player. I share that anecdote simply to let you know that without Sylvain Sylvain, not only don't you get the New York Dolls, you don't get Johnny Thunders. When the band got signed to Mercury Records, they had to record all of the songs in their repertoire. The record company wanted that so that the producer and the record company could help pick songs for their first album. These sessions came out in bootleg form on 7 Day Weekend, which is a Gary U.S. Bond song that they cover, among others. These recordings also came out in CD form on A Hard Night's Day. There's over 20 songs on this. This captures the unvarnished Dolls in rehearsal, direct to tape, doing one-take versions of all of the songs in their repertoire, including covers. Sylvain is the band leader here, enthusiastically carrying the songs through, regardless of when other band members get bored, flub a note, or stop playing entirely. It is fun to hear them in their inception. Incidentally, this cover, of course, was taken from the same session that they used a black and white photo of for the Dolls' debut album. Speaking of which, in July of 1973, the New York Dolls' debut album dropped. Sylvain Sylvain, shown here with marionette-like makeup and the only band member wearing roller skates, Sylvain Sylvain wrote Trash and Frankenstein, two of the coolest songs on this album. He showed the songs to David Johansen, and David wrote some of the most evocative lyrics in the entire Dolls canon. Thus began a lifelong songwriting partnership between David Johansen and Sylvain Sylvain that would survive various post-Dolls musical projects. The other coolest song on this album is Jetboy, and though it is credited to Johansen and Thunders, Sylvain is the one who first heard Johnny playing that riff in rehearsal, and he told Johnny, you could build a song out of that. To which Johnny said, oh yeah, Sylvain, show me. So Sylvain changed the riff a bit, added what he called his baby chords, which were a D and a G, and created a little lead that he'd play later on the finished version. After he showed it to David, who wrote those great lyrics, Sylvain added all the oohs and ahs that truly make the song for me. This example of Jetboy is the reason why I call Sylvain Sylvain the magic ingredient in all of the Dolls' music. He provides the sugar that they sprinkle on top of their sound. Equally adept on rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and piano, Sylvain was the musical Swiss Army knife that the band would pull out to fix any song, get through any rehearsal, or settle any band fight. If you look at any picture of the New York Dolls from any era, Sylvain is the only member who no one is shy about putting their arm around. Toward the end, he was often the member that warring bandmates would communicate through. If you get rid of Trash, Frankenstein, and Jetboy, you eliminate my favorite parts of this album. And I don't know if they're my favorite band anymore. In May of '74, In Too Much Too Soon comes out, their sophomore album. Sylvain and David wrote Puss in Boots for this album. It's got a great herky-jerky rhythm and really fun lyrics, and is one of the standouts on this album, along with Chatterbox. In retrospect, it's a real shame that this album features 4 covers. For an album with only 10 tracks, 4 is an outrageously high number of covers. Unfortunately, the record company had instructed the producer of this album, Shadow Morton, to listen only to David Johansen and Johnny Thunders, who were considered the Jagger Richards of this band, and to ignore every other member, including Sylvain Sylvain. It's a real shame because Sylvain had a few original songs in his back pocket that I believe could have saved this album, and hence turned around the fortunes of the band. So this album came out and stiffed, making less waves than the debut album. Another chaotic tour ensued, playing to less and less people, and a new tack was needed. And they went out on the Red Patent Leather tour. They played the Little Hippodrome in Manhattan. These tapes are from March 2nd, 1975. This album was produced by Sylvain Sylvain. This came out in 1984, so these tapes were only available on bootleg for years. Some who saw these Dolls performances hated them. Some said they were the best they ever were. You can decide for yourself. I'll put a few clips below. There are a few great new songs on this. In addition to Johnny's later Heartbreakers classic, Pirate Love, you also have Sylvain's piano-driven rocker, Teenage News. People say that would have been the title and the title track off the third Dolls album. I believe Teenage News belonged on In Too Much Too Soon, performed here for the first time. If the second album also included the David and Sylvain songs On Fire and Girls, I think we would have been talking about a much better album. And who knows what would have happened to the band. If there is one true star of this death-rattle era of the New York Dolls, it is Sylvain Sylvain, whose professionalism is still in evidence on these recordings. He's tickling the keys, he's playing lead and rhythm guitar, and offering sweetly trilling backing vocals, as well as singing manic lead vocals on his show-stopping Ain't Got No Home, Dizzy Miss Lizzie medley, the joyous delivery of which actually does justice to the Frogman Henry and Larry Williams originals. After Jerry and Johnny quit the Dolls and Arthur was lost to alcoholism, Sylvain and David actually soldiered on and redubbed themselves the Dollettes, and they played a very successful tour of Japan. That was documented in an issue of New York Rocker that I've been tearing this place apart and I can't seem to find. So Syl had that never say die attitude, and Syl kept plugging away in the clubs for years. You probably already know that after the Dolls folded, Malcolm McLaren wrote a letter to Sylvain asking him to move to England, bring his guitar, and to be the front person for a band of boys that worked in his store. John Lydon would have a really shit life right now if that had happened. Sylvain passed, although he regretted sending his beautiful white guitar to England, which would be used by Steve Jones for years. After passing on the Sex Pistols, Sylvain formed the Criminals in 1977. They put out one of the best singles in New York at the time, The Kids Are Back, backed with The Cops Are Coming. The Kids Are Back is a catchy, poppy song that's much lighter than anything the Dolls had been doing previously. The Cops Are Coming is a hard piano guitar instrumental that's equal parts Peter Gunn theme and Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse theme. It's a really fun rocker. In 1979, Sylvain Sylvain dropped Sylvain Sylvain. No record company knew which of the New York Dolls would break big when the band broke up, so everyone got a shot at a solo career. Sort of. David Johansen went solo, Johnny and Jerry had the Heartbreakers, and even Arthur Killer Kane had the Corpse Grinders. But Sylvain got a real shot here. He was signed to a major label, RCA, the home of David Bowie, and Iggy Pop, and fucking Elvis. Syl produced the album with Tony Bon Jovi, yes, John's cousin, the man who in 1977 founded the Power Station, a studio that put out decades of top-notch music. Everything from Walking on Sunshine to Born in the USA. The co-producer on the album? A very young Scott Litt. Yes, that Scott Litt. The man who produced like 6 REM albums. The cover photography is by Tashi. Yes, Syl's friend Tashi, who did the photography for the very first New York Dolls album, back when the record company tried to give them a cover that looked like crap. Tashi came in at the 11th hour and shot this on a thrift couch and perfectly captured the band's sound in a picture. The album got an advertising push too. The ads actually had the words, Sylvain Sylvain, the first and last name in music for the coming decade. It sounds like RCA was really betting on Sweet Syl to break through in a way that the Dolls had not. On this LP is the great Dolls Should Have Been a Hit track, Teenage News. This version is crisp and clean with adorable 50s style backing vocals. What's that got to do with rock and roll is another 50s flavored joint that has more sex appeal and hand clap hooks than anything on In Too Much Too Soon. Syl uncorks party piece from the Red Patent Leather tour, Ain't Got No Home, Every Girl and Every Boy, and 14th Street Beat are two more fun up-tempo rockers, and the track I'm So Sorry is a sweet, syrupy ballad with just the right amount of dirt under its fingernails. It's one of my favorite tracks on the album. The final song on the album is some of the best music on the whole LP. It's a moody, laid-back instrumental called Tonight. High recommend. This album is a tantalizing glimpse of exactly what Sylvain brought to the New York Dolls. Precision, songcraft, fun, upbeat energy, and a throwback sensibility. Jerry Nolan always said that he wanted to join the New York Dolls because they brought back the magic of the 50s. That element of the Dolls came directly from Sylvain. The album didn't break through, unfortunately, as this was a time when punk rock, new wave, and disco were splitting up the consumer dollar between them. No one at the time was looking for 50s style rock and roll. In 1981, Syl dropped Syl Sylvain and the Teardrops. I think this is an even better album than the one before it. This was a trio with Syl on guitar, piano, and vocals, Tubby Reed on bass, and drummer Rosie Rex, who also happened to be Syl's wife at the time, as well as the mother of his child. My favorite track off this whole album is Formidable, aka Tu es Formidable, which is probably the most uplifting song you'll ever hear about abortion, and its hooky chorus will stick in your head for days afterwards. The song Teardrops is quintessential Sylvain, with a sound straight out of the 50s. Real throwback fun. The failure of this album is further proof that the record company had no idea what to do with Sylvain. He should have been put out on tour with a band like the Stray Cats, where he just might have tapped into an audience that could appreciate what he was doing. Or he could have done the nostalgia circuit, opening up for some of these doo-wop bands that meant so much to him on AM radio as a kid. Exploring Sylvain's solo career is a worthwhile endeavor that I implore you to take the dive on. My favorite album by Syl didn't come out until 1998, Sleep Baby Doll. It's a fun album that features songs both old and new, and its title, and the track of the same name, is a tribute to his fallen New York Dolls bandmates. Syl does two Dolls songs, Trash from the first album, and It's on Fire from the Red Patent Leather era. Syl also does the song Frenchette, which is one of my favorite songs from Syl. It came out originally on David Johansen's solo album, which is a great underrated album that I speak about in my Bargain Bin episode, available here. Syl and David also did Funky But Chic and the song Girls from the Dolls days. So there's some great Syl and David penned songs on David's first album. Syl also covers a Johnny Thunder song, Your Society Makes Me Sad, and does a great version of it. Of course, Sleep Baby Doll, the title track, is a beautiful, touching, sad tribute to Billy Murcia and Johnny Thunders. But my favorite song on this entire album is Paper, Pencil, and Glue. It's the lead-off song, and it's brilliant. It's a sweet, mid-tempo rocker that's equal parts bubblegum love song and power pop anthem. Incidentally, this album features John Carlucci from the great unsigned NYC band The Speedies. It features Frank the Freak Infante, who played with Blondie as well as with Iggy Pop. Bob Durwood Andrews from Generation X makes an appearance and plays a really beautiful solo. Rudy Protrudi from the Fuzztones is on here. It's just got a whole bunch of pros doing really good things. I'll put a link to Paper, Pencil, and Glue down in the description, and I really want you to check that single out. The Dolls would of course later reform, first via Morrissey. In 2004, this wonderful, wonderful live DVD came out. I highly recommend it. Catches them at the Royal Festival Hall. You can see firsthand the beauty and sweetness of Sylvain. He's running the band. He's a little heftier around the middle, but he hasn't lost a step. And it's really great to see him back in control. And they would put out more original albums, but they didn't really speak to me like the early Dolls stuff did, or Sylvain's solo stuff. Finally, I really want to recommend Sylvain's book, There's No Bones in Ice Cream. This is such a great book. It's his personal journey from a kid in Cairo all the way to the New York Dolls and beyond. He's so down to earth and he's so forthcoming. It's a beautiful read. It's very insightful. I highly recommend this book as it's the only one written by a doll. Prior to Sylvain's book, you got the Dolls covered in things like Please Kill Me or From the Velvets to the Voidoids, two books which I highly recommend. There's of course the classic Nina Antonia, Too Much Too Soon, Trash, The Complete New York Dolls by Chris Needs and Dick Porter, great book. Stranded in the Jungle, Jerry Nolan's Wild Ride. It's by Kurt Weiss with a foreword by Chris Stein. And of course there's Nina Antonia again with In Cold Blood, which is a fantastic book on Johnny. But There's No Bones in Ice Cream is the only first-hand account of the New York Dolls story from a member of the band. And as such, it is definitive. Everyone has their own perspective. And Sylvain has changed details of certain things over the years every time he tells a story. But the essence of those stories remains the same. This has become my last word on various parts of the Dolls story. This is one of the best books about rock, from a rocker. It's an immigrant story. It's a coming-of-age story. It's a rock and roll can save you story. Syl was the magic ingredient of the New York Dolls. I truly believe that. And he was the heart and soul of the band. So do yourself a favor. If you get one book on the Dolls, make it this one. Hopefully one good thing that can come of this is a reawakening of interest in his career and a re-examination of his back catalog, which is filled with great songs and a lot of love. Thank you for joining me for this special episode of Pop Culture Graveyard. Rest in peace, Sylvain Sylvain. Please do me a favor and subscribe and hit that little bell. Leave me a comment about what the New York Dolls or Sylvain meant to you, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.